For centuries, millions of people have seen the same four letters placed above the head of Jesus on the cross. INRI. They appear on paintings, sculptures, films, crucifixes in churches, even on jewelry. And yet, almost no one ever stops to ask a simple but unsettling question. What did those four letters truly mean at the moment they were written? Most of us were taught a quick answer: Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Clean, simple, comfortable. But history, real history, is very rarely comfortable. As scholars dug deeper into ancient manuscripts, Roman legal practices, Jewish political tensions, and the languages spoken in Jerusalem during the first century, a surprising truth emerged. INRI did not mean exactly what later translations made it appear to mean. In fact, the inscription carried layers of political messaging, cultural tension, and religious irony that barely survive in modern explanations. To the Roman Empire. That wooden sign wasn't a decoration. It wasn't a spiritual proclamation. It wasn't even meant to honor Jesus in any way. It was a sentence, a public declaration of guilt, designed to warn anyone who dared to challenge Rome's authority. Crucifixion wasn't just execution. It was advertising. It was Rome communicating through fear, not through speeches. So why did Pontius Pilate insist on writing it the way he did? Why did the religious leaders of Jerusalem demand that he change the wording? And why did Pilate refuse, answering with the chilling words recorded in the Gospels, "What I have written, I have written"? On the surface, it sounds like stubbornness. But beneath that simple phrase lies a power struggle between an empire trying to maintain order and a fractured religious community wrestling with its own prophecies and fears. INRI, in its original context, wasn't just a description of Jesus. It was a spotlight revealing the political and spiritual tensions of the entire region. And here's where things get even more intriguing. The sign was written in three languages: Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Not because Rome wanted to be inclusive, but because Rome wanted everyone to understand the warning. Latin, the language of power. Greek, the language of trade, culture, travelers. Hebrew, the language of the local population and of the scriptures. Three audiences, one message, infinite implications. But when you peel back the layers of translation, tradition, and centuries of retelling, a deeper question rises to the surface. Was INRI meant to condemn Jesus or expose the people who demanded his death? Some historians believe Pilate was mocking the religious leaders. Others think he was distancing Rome from the execution. And a few even suggest that the inscription unintentionally echoed ancient prophecies the leaders themselves feared. What makes this story so captivating is that INRI became more than a sign. It became a mirror. Rome saw a rebel. The religious elite saw a threat. The disciples saw a king. And history, for 2,000 years, settled for the simplest version because the truth is far more complicated, far more human, and far more revealing. Today, we're going to break through those simplified explanations. We're going to look at INRI the way the people at Golgotha would have seen it, with the political pressure, cultural tension, and spiritual expectation and all colliding in a single moment. And by the end of this video, these four letters may never look the same to you again. But before we go deeper, let me ask you, when you picture that sign above the cross, what do you think it truly meant? Was it a crime, a mockery, a prophecy, or something else entirely? And get ready, because the real story behind INRI is far more explosive than the version most of us were taught. To understand what INRI truly meant, we have to step into the world of Pontius Pilate, a governor ruling a territory he never fully controlled, surrounded by a population divided by religion, politics, and prophecy. Rome did nothing without purpose. Executions were not private punishments. They were public messages. The cross was not merely a tool of death. It was a billboard of fear, and the sign placed above the condemned man was the caption Rome used to explain why this person deserved such humiliation. That's why the presence of an inscription was not unusual. But the way Jesus' inscription was written was extraordinary. Most crucified men received a single-line accusation in one language, usually Latin: thief, traitor, rebel. Simple, crude, and brutally direct. Yet Jesus' charge appeared in 3 scripts, placed deliberately for maximum visibility. This wasn't sloppy or random. It was a calculated act of imperial communication. Latin announced to soldiers and Roman officials, Rome has executed a man who challenged Caesar's authority. Greek spoke to merchants, travelers, scholars, anyone passing through Jerusalem from abroad. This region still belongs to Rome. Do not mistake its religious turmoil for political weakness. Hebrew spoke directly to the heart of the Jewish people. The man you debated, followed, or feared, this is how Rome has judged him. 3 publics, 3 messages, 1 crucifixion. When people passed by Golgotha that day, they didn't just see a dying man, they saw a proclamation intended to crush any hope of rebellion, whether political or spiritual. But here's where the story sharpens into something more than politics. The Gospels mention a confrontation. They demanded Pilate rewrite the inscription to say, "This man claimed to be king of the Jews," not king of the Jews. Why the difference? Because one wording condemns Jesus, the other embarrasses them. If the sign said he claimed to be king, then Jesus alone bore the guilt. But if the sign announced him as king, then the religious leaders appeared complicit in killing the very type of Messiah their scriptures foretold. Pilate knew exactly what he was doing. His refusal, "What I have written, was not mere stubbornness. It was a subtle political strike. In effect, he was saying, "You forced me into this execution. Now the world will see what you have done." The sign became a public indictment, not only of Jesus, but of the leaders who handed him over. Here is the strange twist. Rome intended the sign as humiliation. The religious elite interpreted it as provocation. But the followers of Jesus saw something entirely different: confirmation. To them, the inscription echoed centuries of messianic expectation: a king rejected, a king humiliated, a king lifted up, not on a throne, but on a cross. It is easy for modern readers to miss this tension. We often view INRI as a small detail placed above Jesus because that's just how crucifixions looked. But to the people of Jerusalem, the languages, the order of the words, and even the placement between Jesus, the Nazarene mom, and king carried enormous symbolic weight. This wasn't a plaque, it was a battlefield in 4 letters. Imagine walking through the crowded road that led past Golgotha. You hear different groups arguing in different languages. Roman soldiers read the Latin and laugh. Greek travelers shake their heads at yet another execution in a restless province. Jewish families whisper as they pass the Hebrew text, some outraged, some confused, some quietly wondering if the sign meant more than it seemed. You don't just see a crucifixion, you see an empire trying to control a narrative and losing control of it in real time. Because the more scholars study the political tensions of Judea, the clearer it becomes. INRI was not placed there to honor Jesus. But ironically, it ended up doing exactly that. What was meant as Rome's final word became the beginning of a story Rome never expected to endure. When people look at the cross today, they often focus on the figure of Jesus, on the wounds, on the sacrifice. But very few look at the small wooden sign nailed above his head, 4 letters carved into history, INRI. For many, it's just a traditional detail, something that has always been there, something not worth questioning. But now, after walking through the languages, the politics, the tensions, and the intentions behind those letters, you can see that INRI wasn't a simple inscription. It was a mirror held up to an empire, a religion, and a moment that changed the world. Rome wrote INRI to declare guilt. The religious elite read it as a humiliation. But the disciples saw it as truth shining through the cruelty of men. And here lies the greatest irony of all. What Rome intended as a final insult became the very proclamation that outlived the empire itself. Think about that. The world no longer fears Caesar. The legions are gone. The palaces have turned to dust. But 4 letters hammered into a cross, letters meant to close a chapter, became the opening line of a story that continues 2,000 years later. That is the strange, unpredictable nature of history. Human power tries to control the narrative, but truth has a way of surviving. Rome wanted the crowd to see a rebel. Years later, believers saw a king, and today, scholars see a window into a world where politics and prophecy collided in a single moment. When you understand all this, INRI becomes more than a phrase. It becomes a lens that reveals how fear, authority, tradition, and faith shape the final hours at Golgotha. It forces us to ask the questions that generations have avoided. Did Pilate intend to mock Jesus or expose the leaders who demanded his death? Did Rome accidentally preserve a title it never believed in? And how much of history has been shaped not by what was meant, but by what people later saw? These are not just academic questions. They speak directly to our world today. Because even now, we see how powerful institutions try to define people, shape stories, rewrite events. And yet, time after time, the truth finds a way to surface, even if it takes years, decades, or centuries. That tiny sign above the cross did exactly that. And maybe that's why INRI continues to fascinate both historians and believers. It reminds us that the story of Jesus was never just about what happened to him. It was also about the fears, the ambitions, and the struggles of the people around him. The empire wrote a verdict, but the world read a revelation. And now the question comes back to you, not as a historian, not as a theologian, but as someone living in a world filled with competing voices and narratives. What do you think INRI truly meant? Was it a political statement, a spiritual declaration, a Roman warning, a prophetic truth, or perhaps all of them at once? Your perspective matters, because every generation reinterprets signs, symbols, and stories through its own eyes. And the meaning of INRI, like the meaning of the cross, continues to unfold with each new person who confronts it. If this deeper look at INRI has opened your eyes or given you something new to think about, let me know in the comments. Your insight, your experience, your understanding adds a dimension that historical analysis alone can never provide. And if you want to explore more mysteries, more overlooked details, more truths hidden beneath centuries of tradition, make sure you subscribe. Here, curiosity isn't just welcome, it's essential, because 2,000 years later, the sign above the cross is still speaking. The real question is, are we still willing to listen?